Hey there guys, welcome back. So this is going to be a musing video about coping, about stress, sadness, difficult times, the thought processes and sort of psychological things that go on when, in particular, pagans and witches come into contact with difficult things in their life, things they find really difficult to cope with, and the reactions that I've seen personally, the problems within myself that I recognise and I'm working through. There's been a lot of shadow work in the, or things, I say shadow work, I guess that's an easy term for it. Things coming to the surface to be dealt with, difficult things and reactions, and figuring out where these reactions are coming from and things of that nature. And so I'm just going to muse and discuss and think out loud. And obviously this isn't a happy joy video as you can already tell. But for me it's going to be one of those important to make videos. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations which are hard, and that doesn't even start to cover it. And there are these downward spirals of negativity. And when the situation is affecting your entire household and bringing fear and worry and stress into the household, then it affects everybody involved. And it can become a very difficult environment in which to cope. If one or more people is that, bringing the negative situation in and focusing on the worst case scenario, and it can become very, very difficult to keep your head above water. Particularly if the other person is in any way psychically gifted or empathically linked to you. And if you're a pagan or a witch, it's very likely that you will be sensitive to the plight of the people that you are living with or are connected to. And it becomes very difficult to escape that negativity, that lurch, that feeling of fear and worry. Even the most positive, upbeat people can become affected when their loved ones are suffering, and perhaps the situation affects everybody, as is the case with my life right now. I realised yesterday I had gotten to the point where I didn't feel balanced enough to govern my reactions to stuff that people were saying, and to figure out whether or not what was meant by it was positive or negative, or not meant in the way that I was seeing it through a skewed glass, because I'm surrounded by stress and I'm trying to cope, and certain things being said or whatever don't seem supportive, and some of it seems the complete opposite. And I started going through this in my own mind, about seeing the worst case scenario. When you're surrounded by fear of something happening, or doubt or worry, and you've been through this situation before and you don't want to ever see such times again, and you know what it entails, and you're afraid of it. The first thing you have to worry about, of course, is negatively manifesting what you don't want. And I've been doing my utmost to stop that from happening, not just with me, but with other people in this house, and it feels like fighting a losing battle. And you just become lost in a sort of state of despair, because no matter what you say, time and time again, you cannot keep negatively manifesting this outcome or the worst will happen. These people don't listen and keep doing it, and then why me, and why is the worst case scenario happening? And at some point I just couldn't cope and gave up, trying to reinforce the same idea and being ignored and disrespected in that respect. And it's not from a place of disrespecting me out of disregard for me, it's fear and stress overwhelming reason within people within this house, to the point where now it's affected me to the point where I can't balance and judge my own reaction or my own emotion. To the point where I know what I need right now, and what I must do is cut off. And at the same time, there are going to be people who think that this is the worst thing to do, is to remove yourself from people. But if you're having a fear of what people are saying to you, worrying about it being worst case scenario and whatever, then it's clearly not a environment in which is going to help anybody. Because if I think it is the worst case scenario and it's not, and I'm hurt for no reason, that's hurting me and hurting others. And if they do mean something negative, or what they're saying by, what they said, then that's again only adding to an already stressful, painful experience, and isn't going to help anybody either. I've been dreaming when I have been sleeping, because I haven't slept for about a week properly, about my ex, over and over and over and over again. And I think what it actually comes from is a lifetime of being made to feel that I was not good enough. And whatever I did wasn't enough, and underhanded slights were my mother's bread and butter. The only person I trust to go to for counsel on this situation is my sister, because she's had the same upbringing, she's seen it all, and she can tell me whether or not I'm not balanced and I'm seeing worse than it is. And she too has even recently had situations whereby she had a friend that was supposed to be a very good friend and shared all their intimate stuff, secrets, and were there for each other, and then her friend just up and abandoned her because, well, we don't even really know, although that they both write, and her friend is now releasing a book, and my sister was being supportive and even ordered one, and this friend, inverted commas, said she had dropped water all over the book and ruined it, and then didn't send it her, and then said she'd refund it, and then wouldn't have her at the release party, and cut her off altogether from her life, and without explanation. The only explanation we have are the ones we come up with ourselves, and they're not going to be very forgiving in light of the behaviour. But I trust my sister to tell me whether or not I'm seeing things worse than they are. And I thank the God and Goddess for that. I thank the God and Goddess that I have my sister that can ground me, anchor me, and say to me whether or not I'm overreacting, or whether pain is clouding my judgment, and whether insecurity in the difficult situation of my life and the problems it's throwing to the forefront right now are affecting what I see and feel around me in other ways. As witches and pagans, we have this double sense of the fact that we should be able to get through it and cope, and we sort of feel like we have failed as pagans and witches whenever we can't cope. There's this sense of the fact that I cannot keep negativity out of this house right now because of the situation, and keep it cleansed and keep that crap and negative manifestation of my partner out of this house, and that feels a bit like failing. And I have been fighting it and getting sick and not having the strength to keep cleansing, to keep that negative vibration completely out. And I'm still doing everything I can to release that, still cleansing showers, cleansing baths, working with crystals, smoking the house out once he's gone, trying to set up barriers of negative to protect against negative energy coming back in. But when you in yourself have a tough time feeling balanced and grounded, and then you're surrounded by all that crap, it's a very difficult process to get yourself in the right frame of mind and heart and your energy stabilized to the point where you feel okay to then cleanse your environment and put your best foot forward in situations which are incredibly difficult and you're afraid of. And there's this sense of working with the Morrigan, and people sneer at people who follow the Morrigan who show any fear, who show weakness, as if that's not part of the grand cycle. They don't seem to understand that strength has this cost. Strength is the amount of scars you have, whether they be physically visible or not. And strength is built on the foundation of overcoming fear. But there is this sort of snobbery that if you follow the Celtic path and you show any fear and weakness, that somehow you're doing it wrong. And then there's also this sort of new age guilt trip about feeling these negative emotions as well, that you're only feeling that way if you allow it. You're only you've done this to yourself. It's like this horrible self-attack on people who are going through really hard times. And if you were truly spiritual, you would just you would just get on with it. You would put your best foot forward. You would just be happy and take in the universal energy, and nothing would ever affect you. And to me, I feel like slamming my head into the wall when I hear this sort of nonsense, because it's like, we're not frigging rocks, and even rocks have more emotions than that. We cannot completely deny what we're going through, because that's just displacement of the problem, displacement of our feelings, and not coping with them, and not sort of going through the cycles of your feelings in order to overcome those feelings, even when they're the difficult ones. I know that a lot of my fear is rejection and coping with loss, I guess. Loss, loneliness. My insecurity surrounding a lot of the situation that I'm having to cope with comes from past experiences whereby when I was going through a really difficult time in my life, like the abuse all came out and everything, almost every single person sort of did this rejecting dance, and it was sort of pity, but I don't want that in my life. Like, I'm sorry that you're going through this, but I'm not having your shit affect me. Or this sort of, oh god, now you're dirty, I don't want anything to do with you. And I've seen that more than once in my life. And it's one of the most vile things I've ever seen. People who you've known most of your life growing up, who was, of your best friend and always there for you, and no matter what you need, and then they find out what you've been through, which, to be honest, is enough to destroy a lot of people, and even destroyed who I was, to the point of clawing through and being made whole again. And it's just, I think that still lingers with me. That constantly being told you're not good enough. And then people rejecting you because you are honest about what you're going through, and what you're going through is hard. I'm sort of working through this balance within myself right now of not wanting to make the situation worse than it is, or sort of stress out in myself to the point where I think it's worse than it is, and I'm not focused on solution and coping like this video is. But then on the same flip side of that, I don't like the idea of what some people do of trying to make lighter of it than it is. Trying to make it into, oh, it's not that big a deal. And it's like, well, and then that's like discrediting the pain you're feeling, because then your feelings, your reactions, your difficulty in coping is somehow unjustified, and like you've done something wrong. In a very dark moment, 2 days ago, I began to be very, very upset and very afraid. That there's something innately very wrong with me. And being aware that I'm a difficult person at times, and I was talking to the Morrigan about this, and she was I had that quote from Kill Bill going through my head because of it, which is you're my favourite person, but once in a while you're a real bitch. And we all overreact to things, we all sometimes find situations that we can't really cope with. And I was just feeling a huge amount of self-doubt at that point, and it still plagues me, but it's not as bad as it was a couple of days ago. That somehow because I've ended up quite as an isolated person, that there's a sense of guilt and blame on myself, and there's something deeply wrong with me, is what I was feeling. And I've come through that in the last couple of days. My sister helped me with this, and she said, neither you nor I feed into the mainstream societal bullshit of being fake in order to be popular. And she said, it keeps a worrying amount of people satisfied, because as long as they see a happy gloss over on the surface, then somehow that's all that matters. And if you are honest about the pain that you've been through, people just don't want to know, because it's difficult to deal with. It's not happy la la. It doesn't make them feel better about their existence. And, you're trying to cope, so you're not giving them whatever they need. And then I was thinking about whether or not I was a giving person or a selfish person. And at times we all have to be selfish in order to be okay, but overarchingly, I don't really want to be a selfish person. I don't like it. I grew up with it. I grew up being accused of being a selfish bitch every day of my life. Because I was trying to get me and my sisters through. Trying to be the only friggin' parent there was. And making tough decisions that nobody should ever have to make as a kid. And so there's this whole inner child thing about feeling rejected, and at the same time this sort of adult thing about not wanting to be selfish. I've never liked it. I'm trying to be, aware of my behaviours, and I was thinking to myself, am I a giving person? And I think I am. I'm an incredibly wary person, and unfortunately that's based on experience as well, so certain things do trigger me and I'm very wary of them. Certain things being said, I'm very wary of it. But I was trying to think of am I a giving person? And I thought, well, I try to be. The amount I give in videos is more than people perhaps feel I should. And a lot of it is free and spell work and thoughts and putting myself out there. And I try to be generous and giving in a whole load of other ways. Some of it will be a little bit materialistic side of things, trying to be giving in that sense. But on the other hand of that, I don't want to be defined by what I give or don't give in terms of materialism. Trying to put a great deal of thought and time and energy and love into things that I send and things I create for people. Yes, that has the store aspect in there as well, but I'm sick to death of being made to feel guilty for trying to survive in a world which is materialistic. I always get made to feel And whether this is me doing it, other people doing it, or most likely a combination of both, about things that I buy, materialism, hauls, things of that nature. Halloween, I always get made to feel this way, and the fact that I put money aside all year for it doesn't seem to enter into the sphere of consciousness. I don't have a lot of money of my own. What I do have, I put some away all year round for Halloween. So yeah, I have a lot of Halloween stuff. I do Halloween hauls, there'll probably be 4 or 5 each year. Usually one really big one, and then a few littler ones. But I save up all year, and that makes me feel better. And part of me feels guilty that it makes me feel better, because it's like materialistic items to release stress, and it's sort of displacement, which is something I struggle with. Not sort of basically trying to distract and displace yourself with too much of something in order to cope. And this comes into eating habits as well as spending habits. But the amount of guilt and judgment from myself and sometimes from others seems hugely unnecessary and upsetting. Nobody knows what money, and nobody has the right to judge what money you do or don't have. And right now, in my difficult circumstance, I could have not bought all my Halloween things and had that money aside for it. Yeah, I could have. And on the other side, this is the one time of the year where I actually spend a lot of money. I don't spend a lot of money on my birthday. And I don't spend a lot of money for Christmas. Or any other Sabbath, really. I go hunting for as much bargains and money off things as I can, and it's the one time of the year that I like to buy rather than craft. I'm a crafter, I make all year round. And I hate that I have to feel like I have to justify these sorts of things, and that's conditioning. Conditioning of the society we live in to judge the way other people live and spend money. Conditioning of growing up in a household where I was constantly told I wasn't worth anything, and seeing my mother spend huge amounts of money on herself and then the youngest sister, and then buy a new dog, but then I couldn't have a school trip because it was too expensive, or I couldn't, I don't know, also I couldn't have a birthday present because she had no money, and then the same day she'd buy a £600 something for herself, and that happened more than once. And there is that all brimming to the surface with this, and I thought I got through most of this with regards to, I don't know, but I clearly I haven't, because being controlled by money and rejection are two of these huge threads which are coming up over and over and over again, within terms of coping and feeling stressed and feeling overwhelmed within a sense of self, you know, being afraid of losing myself because of money, and losing myself because of being rejected and not fitting into this cookie cutter idea of what a human should, female friend, witch should be. I don't ever really want to lie about where I am. And if, you know, I'm not going to pretend to be okay if I'm not. And me doing that last time resulted in the loss of every other friend I had, bar one. And people rejecting you and making you feel like you're a bad person. 2 days ago, I did. I sat there feeling like, am I a bad person? And I do not leave sympathy comments down below, because I don't want them. I don't want this idea that by being honest it's seeking confirmation of self or sympathy, because as I go on and on and on, I know that's not going to help. It's not going to fill the void. It's nice to know that people are there for you, if they are there for you, if they're really there for you. Because words are cheap, and I know there are some people that are there for me, and for them, thank the Maker. And yeah. So how do you cope? How do we cope when hopelessness is threatening to override your sense, your ability to accept the good, to draw on universal energies of love and hope, and making you see everything with a negative spin? Oh, I like falling apart and cracking apart. And additionally, when the situation isn't it's not directly yours, it's in the house, it's your partners, it's your families, and it's going to affect everything, but it's not yours, so you can't take direct action. You can't fix it yourself. Just yourself. And you can scream till you're blue in the face, but unless the action is taken, nothing changes. But it's not your action. Again, it's that feeling of that culminates in from rejection of your thoughts, rejection of your advice, rejection of your friendship, rejection of who you are as a person, as well as judgment, and judgment of a negative fashion. I guess the answer is by any means necessary. There is no point getting stuck in negative cycles of coping, obviously. And I said yesterday that was very likely my last haul, because it was the last of my money. And I meant it. There has to be balance and finding your way back to yourself. I think the only way to cope is to be okay with who you are. And even if other people are suggesting that you're not a nice person or a good person or whatever, then to draw a way to remember who you are and everything you have been through, and accept there are parts of yourself which need work. I definitely need work on seeing the worst case situation, because it's a part of me that I'm constantly having to work on anyway, and then when I'm surrounded by other people who are perpetuating the worst case scenario over and over again to me and reaffirming my fear, then that makes it 100 times worse. So accepting there are parts of you that you need to work on, but I don't think, for most, am I a bad person? No, I'm not. I want to help people, I want to be generous with people, but I am not willing to bleed myself dry anymore. I'm overly wary and cautious and see negative things perhaps where I shouldn't and over worry about them. But at the same time, I can't be overly trusting because I've been burnt by that recently. I let a guy friend in, rip me to shreds. Nothing to do with YouTube. But it did. It ripped me to shreds. And I have a very difficult time with every time I let someone in. It feels scary, and there is always that possibility. And unfortunately, I'm more sensitive than I should be, so that doesn't help. But there are situations which have reaffirmed that, and in a negative fashion, which is not great. Still searching for my tribe, I guess. Like that quote from American Horror Story. The meme. It was on my Facebook. I've changed it to a crow one. But I guess that's what coping is about. It's about figuring out how to be your own friend. And what you deserve and what you don't deserve, and what you need and what you don't need, and what is fair and what's not fair. Coping with overwhelming stress and sadness, and trying to see the sunlight through the clouds, basically. I guess the best advice, and this is sort of me for me and me for others, when you're a witch or a pagan or whatever, is remembering that you don't fail because you feel these things, because you're hurting or in pain or sad or angry. That's not failing as a person, as a witch, as a whatever. It's not, it's just part of the human experience. It's just that you have to keep moving and keep releasing and keep going, and just try and remember that you are loved by the divine, even in your darkest moments. So that's going to be it for this video. As much a cathartic video as anything, but yeah. So I may take a few days just to breathe. Many blessings.